Old business, letter B. I make a motion.
I skipped that one.
I'd make a motion that we strike 4351 from the agenda because this is not the appropriate place to talk about it. We have a policy committee that is supposed to be discussing it. We talked about at our last board meeting that we wanted to have a work session to talk about what short-term suspensions and disciplines and all that kind of stuff goes. So I don't know that we don't talk about policy and decide policy without it going through policy committee. So that is my reason for striking it from an agenda without having the policy committee having looked at it at all.
Okay, so we have a motion from Ms. Crable. Is there a second?
I'll second this for discussion, because I just would like to know my question. Can I start, Mr. Wilson?
Second, Ms. Walker.
So I don't know who put it on here. I'm not really sure. I know.
Ms. Bradford.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you. I mean, obviously, we have a group come to us and want to talk about it. And I'm fine to talk about suspension. I mean, we've been talking about this for years. I think we have done some amendments on suspensions in the past. I just don't know why it's here and not going through policy first. That's all the questions I had. Maybe Ms. Bradford can answer that. I don't mean to be personal.
Or Ms. Mason.
Whoever. I'm fine with that.
Ms. Mason had her hand up, so we'll go with Ms. Mason.
And I actually took the note. I saw that this was a concern that Ms. Bradford had brought forward, and so I have brought it to the lawyer, and that's something that I hope that we can discuss at the next policy meeting. So it should be on the agenda for the policy meeting on the 18th, 19th.
Yeah, of March.
Yeah.
I actually typed the request in the middle of the call to the audience last month, because as long as I can remember, these people have been coming and begging us to consider the children, and they're just asking to be heard. And while I don't necessarily know how I would vote on anything, I want to hear from them, and then I want to hear this body respond to them in an open forum so that they get their answers. Because honestly, the amount of time that we have listened to them beg us to take up policy 4351 is, again, we're disappointing people when we don't have to. We can just be transparent. Whatever our reasons are for saying no to them, if we say no to them, then they need to know it, and then we can move on. I'm sure, that they'd be grateful for that.
Ms. Walker.
So I'm absolutely happy to hear that we're going to be discussing it finally, but my question is, why are we doing it at a board meeting when we haven't gone through policy yet? And are we going to perhaps vote on something? Because it's under an actionable item on the agenda, so.
It says possible action, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, I don't know if we should do that. I mean, when I hear from people, and I think you may be referring to the love of our children, you want to hear from them. I know.
I'm sure.
Ms. Bradford? Ms. Bradford?
Well, yes, so, because we've all individually met with them a bunch of times. I know I have over the 3.5 years I've been on the board, and I'm happy to. I think they're a great group. I'm worried that we're going to be trying to make policy on there without having all the answers, that's all. I mean, I'm not opposed to that discussion.
Bradford?
I just, if they come to policy, they don't have a chance to speak at all, and it's in the middle of the day, and, I don't know their schedules. I just wanted it transparent. I have complete strangers come up to me and ask me, why do you never let those people on policy 4351 have what they're asking for? Well, does it make any sense to me why you would not let a little person have a phone call to the parent to say, come? And I think I've heard the answer at least once in a policy meeting at one time, but I just think for the sake of transparency and just flat out kindness, we need to hear it in a public setting. Let them, and they'll sign up for call to audience. Somehow they manage to always get on there, and they always talk about the same thing. I just want to give them their due process.
Yeah, and so I don't disagree with anything that's being said here, but I think that we need to be consistent in following our policies and our protocols, and we don't bring policies to the board without having gone through the policy. Ms. Bradford can make all of these statements in a public forum at our policy committee, and the people that are coming to call to the audience now will know that we're talking about it at the next policy committee meeting. So they will have an opportunity to again talk to us, from call to the audience, reach out to us, have special meetings with us, So I'm not opposed to the discussion at all. I'm opposed to not following our process and getting ahead of ourselves, because we shouldn't continue to do that. That was my only reason.
Ms. Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do recall this was discussed in policy last year, and one of the concerns that was brought up by our principal representative. In the general statute, from recollection, it does not require a parent present, because in the extreme situation, well, we know that it's a relationship, right, with our parents and our schools. And so we don't want to tie the hands of any party involved when we're talking about due diligence. And so I saw this on the agenda, and I thought the whole point of putting it on the whole format was because not everybody watches the policy meetings, and so to have that conversation openly, to understand this is where the general statute is coming from, this is the process and procedure that we value and do say, because all those, when we had this discussion in policy meeting, it was talked about what the process is to go through to involve the families and the parents, but also it was an acknowledgement of the general statute that does not make that requirement in the event that a parent could use that against us. They say, well, if we don't come up to school, then they can't suspend my kid. And so we find ourselves in this interesting situation, let me say it like that. And that was from recollection, I don't know, this was probably 9 months ago. So this was something that we brought to policy and had the conversation. So I have no problem having the open discussion to kind of share that out in a public forum. I did not read this as saying that there is going to be, if there is a discussion that we would like for the policy committee to make recommendations, we can do that. But I felt reading this, that was the process behind why this was there.
Mr. McMaster, Ms. Walker.
I agree. It's something we need to hear. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. The policy committee, they can decide right now. Obviously, we've got 50%. So what's the other 50%? And then we can move on. I don't mind hearing them, but we need to be prepared because, well, I was pointing at you because you were, but Bradford and,
Craybill.
yeah, thank you. And,
Mason.
but you need to be aware that trying to contact parents in the middle of the day is a challenge, which most of you have never experienced. And depending on the discipline issue, it's unreasonable to expect to hold a kid in an office area or stick them with someone else to be in charge of them, which nobody certainly doesn't appreciate having to do that for you. I've been in a lot of offices this year in other schools and seen when a kid was seated, and it's a challenge for the secretary. You make them a caretaker immediately, and anyone else who walks in the door. But I think it's a good discussion. But I think we need to make sure that we're prepared for alternatives. Do you call a parent? Of course you should call a parent. But I assure you, there are many parents that can't come. So do you delay it? Do you send them back to the teacher's classroom? I wouldn't advise that. Number two, where do you put them? And so just so as long as we understand the big picture, because that's not going to work all the time. I'll probably say most of the time. Because then you got a principal sit there and someone might have to find transportation, or they might be in a meeting. Well, can we do it at 4 o'clock? Or can we do it? I mean, just think about the way the programs work. But a phone call and a FaceTime, maybe that's the way to make it work. But to come to school, I'm not sure that's going to work at all.
Thank you, Mr. McMaster. Ms. Walker.
I guess I'll close out my discussion on this, I guess since it's already on policy again, correct? Then that seems like me the best method, and then we can bring it back next month and have our own discussion once it's gone through policy and we've gotten our recommendations from the policy committee, if any, and if we hear from staff. I don't have a problem talking about it. The possible action part is the one I have a problem with, because I don't feel like that's the process that we should be doing from the dais about a policy that really needs a lot of discussion, as Mr. McManus has just pointed out. We need to hear from staff, we need to hear from, parents, or maybe other parents, or maybe, people that are in the policy committee. I just think, I'm happy to hear about it, that's all, but I don't, and have discussion, like Ms. Barnes said, but I don't know about voting on anything. That's what can we stick it under another section, or maybe have it under?
It's not the appropriate place.
I know, I'm trying to be easy.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and vote.
Can I just make one point too, that
You've had your 2 times already.
the principal won't be there
Thank you.
at this meeting on the dais.
This motion now is to pull 16B from the meeting next week.
Mr. Wilkemore.
Yes.
Ms. Mason.
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart.
Yes.
Ms. Bradford.
The motion is to pull it?
To pull
Yes.
it. And because it's going through, my thought is it's going through policy already.
No.
Ms. Craybill.
Yes.
Ms. McManus.
Yes.
And Ms. Walker.
Yes.
That passes 6-1, so that will be pulled for next week. Yes, ma'am?
Would it be possible, I mean, I don't want to have a policy meeting where we have people lined up to talk to us. I don't want us to sit there and make a decision without hearing people talk to us. That was the whole point. You know, so what do? Do we have a town hall on it? Do we have a workshop on it? Because these people are not going to stop coming and asking us until we deal with it once and for all. That was the point, to have 7 people hear everything at the same time, not to have to watch a video, hear from staff if they're in there, you know, and come to some conclusions in our heads. Then when we go to policy, we can actually work on it in policy. But you're just putting the horse, you know, in the wrong place with the cart, and it's not accomplishing the whole point of the discussion. And just because...
Point of order. We already voted on this.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. We're going to carry on then to new business.